Okay, I think we're ready for our speaker. Robin is going to be doing an update on our work at Immigrant Springs. And just as a quick refresher, show this map of the area. I think you're all familiar with it, but from Pendleton, the green line here is the Oregon Trail as it's generally accepted in the National Park Service documentation. And we were contracted by them to do some research at Immigrant Springs. It's I noticed that says Immigrant Springs now. That's been there a long time. Nobody's commented on it. Thank you. There's a lot more going on in that area, and that's what we're going to hear from Robin. He reported on some of it when we started the project. That was last June. We had a field trip involving about a dozen people to go out and try to sort this out. And as I say, it's much more complicated. The green line that shows there is what has generally been accepted as the trail in a lot of different documentation, from Jack Evans to Aubrey Haynes and various publications. And there's some real questions that have come up with respect to that. So with that, let me stop sharing my screen and I'll turn this over so that Robin can take over and do his presentation.
Here we are, Emigrant Springs.
Looks like the Webb telescope.
That's actually, let me get rid of this down here. Okay. That's actually from a radio telescope called the Meerkat Array in South Africa.
Ah.
There we go. I'll go through a lot of this fairly quickly because you know, I did cover a lot of this mapping stuff in the May meeting that we had. This was a National Park Service project to evaluate trail ruts near Westminster Woods Church Camp near Emigrant Springs. And we were there from June 28th to July 1st and did 4 separate explorations, which I will talk about. And we prepared a report for the National Park Service, but I won't be going over the report itself, but I'll be covering pretty much the same information. So where are we talking about? It's kind of like Dave's map, isn't it? Here's a map of Oregon, and the red arrow obviously is the general area. I expected some people from Colorado to be on the call, but I guess did they not make it?
I didn't see him.
Okay. Well, and here's the close up there. Meacham and Westminster Woods Church Camp, which is just south of Emigrant Springs. And we'll be talking about several things, the previous mapping efforts, which I'll go over fairly quickly since I did that in May. And I don't think we have a whole lot of new people on the call. Map overlays and using LiDAR, which we did quite extensively. And the designing an exploration plan, documenting, and photos. This will be the fun part. And our findings and an additional personal hypothesis. Previous mapping efforts, the GLO surveys, of course, 1863, 64, 82, and 87. Archer Butler Holbert, who was a he was a history professor, and I think when he died, he was a professor at Colorado University in Colorado Springs.
Colorado State Colorado.
And the Oregon State Highway Department effort in 1959, that's what the National Park Service map is based on, and a lot of the other maps, which you'll see. And, you know, in 72, in that time frame, Percy Brown and Aubrey Haynes And 81, the National Park Service Comprehensive Management and Use Plan. And Gregory Francois with his book, Maps of the Oregon Trail. And 91, John Jack Evans with his powerful Rocky book. General Land Office surveys 1863, late 1863, Timothy Davenport surveyed and established the Willamette area, and that's pretty much all he did. He did document the old Emigrant Road in one place, and 64 was the first real survey. It was only of sections 3 and 10, the Meacham area, and that was because that. Well, I'll get to that. 82, we have a gap there until we survey the entire township of 1 South, range 35 East, basically Camella to Meacham, and then from Meacham to nearly Dead Man's Pass wasn't done until 1887.
Carol?
Okay, this area, this is the 1864 survey of sections 3 and 10, and this area was surveyed because of settler activity in what we now know as Meacham. Gold had been discovered in late 1861 near Baker City, and travel east over the Blue Mountains was rapidly increasing. In 1862, Harvey and Alfred Meacham built a small hotel and established the Meacham Stage Station, shown as a blue dot on the map. And the Meacham brothers also built a toll road shown on the map to make from freight wagon and stage traffic. And business was so good, they built a larger hotel in 1865. And this particular map and the surveyor notes are key to understanding the location of pioneer roads in the area. And we'll be coming back to this later in the presentation. Here's the 1882 survey. You see the blank spot up in here is sections 3 and 10 that had already been surveyed. The 1882 surveyors didn't resurvey it. And the red is the Emigrant Road, and the blue is what they termed the Foster Toll Road. The 1887 survey, which is north of Meacham, shows they call the Oregon Trail basically the Pendleton on the Grand Wagon Road. They do have a section down here they labeled Old Emigrant Wagon Road, and some places in here they called an Old Stage Road. But by 1885, the railroad had been built over the Blue Mountains, going through Meacham, and stage and freight wagon traffic were beginning to decline. And we skip ahead to 1920. Archer Butler Holbert published a whole bunch of maps. He was an historical geographer, a professor of history, and a writer. And one of his maps was the Crown Collection of American Maps. And he included the Meacham area here. And I've outlined the Oregon Trail in red and the what he labeled the Foster Toll Road in blue. He worked primarily from the GLO maps. And our definitive study here in 1959, the Oregon State Highway Department began a major Oregon Trail mapping effort for the 59 Oregon State Centennial. They published 10 maps covering from Snake River to the Dalles. And they use these, as you see here, the large scale county maps. The topographic maps weren't available yet. You know, the 1 to 250,000, the 1 by 2 degree was available, but it's much too large scale to be very, very useful. And this was a 2-year effort. The 57 and 58 basically, and they were basically working on their own time. Earl Bickmore was responsible for this area going over the Blue Mountains, and he had copies of 11 pioneer diaries and access to the GLO survey maps. And for early researchers, access to the maps and the surveyor notes was difficult at best. They would have had to have gone to a location where there were paper copies. And since the state highway engineers were working on their own time, this would have been off hours. So they couldn't do it during the day when those offices probably a BLM office would be open in order to look at the maps and the surveyor notes. So he compared the routes shown on the surveyor maps with the description in the emigrant diaries, and if a conflict occurred, the diary took precedence. Blue Mountains was one area where the presence of toll and freight roads was confusing, and he relied heavily on the emigrant diaries. And to quote Earl, to differentiate between these toll and freight roads in the old Oregon Trail, the only authentic acceptable descriptions would be those made by the emigrants themselves. There's no record of which diaries Earl actually used. And I reviewed Pioneer Diaries in a couple of publications. First two publications I went over was the Stephen Dow Beckham's In Their Own Words, Volume 1, the Snake River Crossing to Echo Meadows, and his Grand Ronde Valley and Blue Mountains, Impressions and Experiences of Travelers and Immigrants, 1812 to 1880. I didn't find a lot of detail about the location of the Oregon Trail. As you saw in my May presentation, their camps can pretty much be mapped, using their diaries. The trail mileage is in their diaries, but as far as where the trail went from a particular camp, you just don't find that information. And this is the 72 Percy Brown map. He also used the GLO maps, the black lines in the lower right-hand corner, or he shows the toll road and the emigrant road there going through the area. He uses, let me zoom in here. He has a blue line through the area here, and this is basically the Oregon State Highway Department route. And he notes some places in here where there are ruts. And Aubrey Haynes, who was was instrumental in doing the preliminary survey for the comprehensive management and use plan that came out in '81. This was his map. He doesn't show any of the GLO map information, but he's got, he's got a black line through here for the route of the trail. Again, this is the Oregon State Highway Department route, and he's shown some black dots for different places that he found trail ruts. And the '81, the National Park Service Comprehensive Management and Use Plan. According to Jack Evans, Aubrey Haynes's maps were prepared in '72 in connection with an Oregon Trail study undertaken by Aubrey for the National Park Service. Jack Evans says in his book, Powerful Rocky, that Haynes based his own work on earlier mapping by Oregon Department of Transportation personnel, traces reported by that agency's field engineers, and low-level aerial photographs. These data were then plotted on USGS quadrangles and confirmed by field investigation. National Park Service was, largely, I already said that they were based largely on Haynes's work. And we'll go to '82 to Gregory Francois, and this is from Maps of the Oregon Trail. He basically just copied the route from the Oregon State Highway Department maps here. And I don't think there's no record that he actually did any field surveys in the area. And our second major researcher was Jack Evans, who his book, Powerful Rocky, this is map 320. He shows here the Meacham area, Lee's encampment, and the dots are really the route of the trail. Again, he's using the Oregon State Highway Department route, and he has dashes for places that he found ruts. And I've sort of outlined them in blue here to make them a little more legible. And he says in these books, some of the visible traces that I've shown on maps 317 through 322 may be those of a later stage road that followed much the same route as the Oregon Trail. So keep that in mind when we get to some maps later in the presentation. So how do we make sense of all these maps and their rut locations? Map overlays is one of the techniques that I've used to make sense out of these. I use CalTopo. That's capable of creating map overlays from JPEG images of historical maps. And I use the same JPEG image that I used for the previous slides. And we do this so we can so that I could trace onto the CalTopo base map a track of what's shown on the overlay map. And once more than one ruts track has been created, comparison can be made between them. So I did a whole bunch of them, and I'll kind of briefly go over the process here. This is a portion of the OSHD map as a map sheet overlay. It's kind of the whitish grayish area there. I had to take the map and orient it with north to the top because it's not, as you saw previously, the map is kind of skewed. And then I cropped it to kind of our study area here, and made sure that it was level before I put it into CalTopo. And it was a process by which you take places on both maps, like I use section corners, maybe here and down here on both maps, and they're aligned, and then you get it to line up like this. And this is a close-up of our study area. Westminster Woods is down here. The park is right in here. And these are the visible ruts on the Oregon State Highway Department map. These smaller dots here are just the route, and they used these large dots to show where the ruts are. And then in CalTopo, I traced over those and came up with a track, with a GPS track essentially, and we can take the overlay away, and there we have it. Now the next the next map I'll show is I'll add some other ruts. These are Jack Evans's ruts. And I did the same thing with Jack's map and marked where his ruts were, and then put them together on the CalTopo map along with the OSHG. And we see the areas where Jack found ruts. Now we'll compare multiple ruts tracks from 5 historical maps. And the OSHG in red again, the continuous ruts. The Percy Brown is in brown, naturally. Aubrey Haynes is in orange, and the CMUP in green, and Jack Evans is blue. And we can see pretty much that those ruts are all in the same area. But on to LiDAR maps. These can be very useful. And also the LiDAR track from the map can be verified on the ground. And the Park Service provided us with a LiDAR map of our study area, which was quite detailed, quite high resolution. So it was very useful. And a prominent north-south LiDAR track, once I started looking at it, shows on the map, and starts at the south at Ross Road, which would be just west of Meacham, and proceeds northwest for about 3 miles, crosses the pipeline corridor, and coincides with the trail ruts near Westminster Woods Church Camp, which is what we were there for, to try to determine what those ruts were, and crosses the road leading to the Urbis cabin, which I'll show on another map, and appears to end at a gravel road west of Emigrant Springs. Here's the map itself. And let me zoom in on this guy. This is how we got it from the Park Service. It shows, obviously, there's the freeway, the Highway 30 over here, Westminster Lane coming down here. There's a state park area down here with the manager's house and the maintenance area. They put these red section lines on here, which is useful to line it up with the CalTopo map. They show their route, which is basically the OSHD route through the area. And this blue and the pink are the areas of where they wanted to focus our attention. And what else do you see? You see through here, you see the pipeline corridor, which is really a major feature throughout the whole area. This pipeline corridor coming up through here. And the LiDAR track that we eventually found, you can see it coming up through here and coming up through these pink areas here, and then going north this way. And here I've overlaid it onto the CalTopo map, and I've brought the opacity down so you can see some of the detail of the map underneath it. Here's Westminster Woods. There's some surveyor note locations here. The green ones are for the stage road, the Urbis cabin, and we'll get to that later in the presentation, is over here, and the park up here. Again, there's the dash line going through here. This is from the base map as opposed to the CalTopo, to the overlay for the LiDAR map. And I did basically the same thing I did with the other map sheet overlays. I drew a blue line along that LiDAR track. And then when we remove the overlay, here we have our LiDAR track through the area and how it kind of relates to, all these other features, Westminster Woods, the surveyor notes, etc. And next we'll create a base map basically, and I re-added the OSHD route here, and I put some property boundaries here. We had and did those in color. We had this is park property here in the green. This is the Urbis property we had permission to walk on. This purple is the Westminster Woods property, which we had permission to walk on. This is John Hancock Life Insurance Company, which we didn't have permission on. And this was, I think, administered by John Hancock out here. We did not have permission to hike on that. This is forest recovery property down here, and we did have permission there. So we had enough to keep us busy. And we had to come up with some kind of an exploration plan. And the rut locations along the OSHD route seemed key. It showed continuous ruts. Multiple trail researchers seem to have used that map, and their rut locations are all along that particular route. And the LiDAR track from the NPS map seemed key. And it was looking over the LiDAR map, it was the only LiDAR track with any continuity north and south through the study area, and coincided with the surveyor note locations near Ross Road at the southern end, and coincided with the trail ruts southwest of Westminster Woods Church Camp. And both routes were explored during our stay. And Dave got permission from as many landowners as he could. And we broke everything down into manageable chunks, by day. And logistics for one-way explorations were arranged. This was basically Dave dropping us off and picking us up, as we hiked generally to the south, and so we didn't have to hike back up. He would pick us up at the end.
Robin, you haven't mentioned that the temperature was about 105 degrees.
Oh, yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah, yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, the whole time the temperatures were. I stayed at Westminster Woods Church Camp, and it was, it was approaching 100 there, but you're at 4,000 feet in the mountains. Down in Pendleton, it was 110 plus.
Oh,
So it was pretty crazy.
wow. Okay.
So we we got early starts. Let's put it that way. And the on the ground techniques were determined, GPS tracking, photo documentation, and a zigzag hiking technique when we're searching for the OSHD ruts, cover a wide swath of ground. And daily plan. David arranged for Mike Urbis to give us a little talk and lead us on a tour of his land. So that's what we did on day one. Day two, we explored his property in a more in a more controlled fashion. And then we also explored the wagon ruts in the OSHD route southwest of Westminster Woods. And day three, we walked the LiDAR track from Westminster Woods all the way down to Ross Road. And on day four, we explored the OSHD route from Westminster Woods all the way down to Ross Road. And I'll show you maps of all of this when we get to that. Documenting, we did GPS tracks of all explorations, photo waypoints, DSLR photos with embedded GPS locations. Newer DSLR cameras have a GPS radio receiver built in, so you can have GPS location tagging on your photos, smartphone photos, and GPS tracking software with a photo waypoint capability. I have a program that will do that. Instead of just putting a dot on the map, it can take a photo, and that's tied to the location on the map. And producing digital maps, I use CalTopo mapping software and Google My Maps. And this was the best option to display GPS tracks and the photos. CalTopo doesn't have the capability of integrating the photos into the map. So in the project report to National Park Service, which I won't cover in this presentation, and we'll get to our explorations here. And this is kind of the more fun part after all this mapping stuff. Our first hike, we had the tour of the Urbis property on the day before, and this was our first exploratory hike. And we show, let me zoom in on this just because I can. And Westminster Woods is over here. We came in from the up above here and drove down the pipeline corridor, and we're let off here. And then we came down this road here is an overgrown road onto the Urbis property, and then along the property line, crossing the OSHD route to this property line and going back over and crossing again. Then coming back up this property line, since we didn't have permission to explore here, and hit the LiDAR track and followed this back up to the to where we had parked. Okay, this is actually a photo from the previous day. Frank and Steve and Dave and Wendy and Jenny and Elise and Dave Powell. These are from Westminster Woods Church Camp. And we see, notice the happy smiling faces. Well, after several days, we're going to be looking at some frowns, I think, especially because of the hot weather. And this is the Mike Urbis cabin that we visited. He has a nice cold water well there, which was very, very refreshing. And this is a pond on his property.
How old is the Urbis cabin? What's that date back to?
I don't know about the cabin itself. They purchased the property in 1939.
Okay.
So it's probably about, Depression era.
Okay.
something like that. You know, I don't recall that he said that he, you know, built the cabin or rebuilt it or anything. So I would assume that it was something on the land, but I can't be sure. These cottonwood trees around this pond here are really big. Some of those are approaching, you know, 5 feet in diameter. There's quite a few of them around there.
Wow.
Pretty nice.
Hmm.
And this is our actual our day one hike. This is about 6:30 in the morning, and we're walking the pipeline corridor down to where we'll hit the road to get onto the Urbis property. And this pipeline corridor was an entry and exit point for us, different hikes that we did. And it's a major feature of the landscape. This was first put in, natural gas was flowing over this pipeline in 1957. So this was here when the Oregon State Highway Department engineers, you know, did their work. And here we're on, this is the overgrown road kind of leading down to the Urbis properties. This road's on the USGS topo map, even though it's obviously it's not used, at least not very much. And then we're heading through the woods toward the OSHD route location, searching for ruts. This is Lee Crotzer's husband, Dave. It looks like he's looking around a corner to see if he can spot any ruts. And this is on the LiDAR track. We're headed back to the road that we came in onto the Urbis property. And we're still on the LiDAR track just before the road. Here you can see that this is Brenda Garrick, Emigrant Springs Park staff. You can see a depression here for the LiDAR track. And we didn't find any evidence of ruts in the OSHD route locations on this particular hike. And this was our first hike of the day. We went back to Westminster Woods and did another hike. Westminster Woods. We started out actually from the chapel, which is right over here, walked to the LiDAR ruts, and we're walked west on those. These are ruts that the church camp has signed the Oregon Trail, and there's a very definite, obvious, road going through here. And we went, followed this west till we hit this property line, and then we'll follow the property line down to this property line and across here. We didn't have permission to explore here, so we didn't go there. And then we came back here and came back out that way.
Robin, how many total miles was that?
I'd have to look. The mileage that we hiked really wasn't very much. That was probably a mile and a half, maybe, or 2 miles.
Okay.
Not very much. This land up here is pretty much, it's just slightly inclined. I mean, you walking around, you'd say it was flat, but it's just slightly inclined from northwest to southeast. And it's a lot of it's open. Some of it's been logged. But it's fairly high elevation, mixed forest. And we crossed the fence and out to the to the LiDAR route here. And this is the portion that's signed Oregon Trail. They have a bench up here you can see that shows the is a place for people to rest. And then here we're walking the LiDAR track, west of the pipeline corridor. And we leave the LiDAR track, and we're just walking through a meadow here on the way to the OSHD rut location. And this is an area of where we should be seeing ruts. There's a lot of linear openings through the woods like this, but we didn't find any ruts in them. And here's Frank walking along a property line here. most of the property lines we encountered were clear of, or were clear of trees. You know, because they do apparently do maintenance on the on the fences from time to time, and they've cleared these. So these are another kind of an avenue through the, you know, through the trees. That's pretty easy to walk. Here's Brenda Garrick trying to find some ruts. And this was a common kind of a site up here too. This is a game trail going through, or a cattle trail, but no swale or depression for ruts. Our hike the next day was just to do the lidar track all the way down to Ross Road. We have Westminster Woods up here, the lidar track. The day before we had hiked out this way, and this day on June 30th, we walked south all the way down through here, and eventually ended up at Ross Road, where Dave picked us up. And that was a good thing, because we'd have had to have walked back up all the way in the hot sun. And here we are. This is Westminster Woods Church Camp. This I should have taken some pictures of the camp itself, but this is the dining room and kitchen area here. And in behind me is there's a bunkhouse, and over here I think you can just see the part of the bathhouse over here. Very nice camp, and there's some camping areas around there too that they have hookups for. So here we are on the walking the lidar track. We've hit that, and then are moving probably southeast and then gradually south, walking down that. But you can see it's, again, it's another sort of an avenue through the trees. And this is one spot where we came. There was a junction here. This is our lidar track that we're going to follow. This track here goes over to the state park maintenance area. And Mark Miller, who's the manager there, said he's walked this a bunch of times. So we're heading down this way. And just walking the lidar track, really easy to follow. Because of the vegetation, you can't really see you know, much of a swale or depression, but it's there. And we'll give you a little video here. Again, this is just walking the lidar track. It's a little jumpy over Zoom. And we're walking through a meadow. You notice where Steve and Frank are standing. There's a depression there, and the vegetation is very light there. It's like the ground is compacted, so it doesn't grow up like it does on either side of them. And it hits the pipeline corridor again. Here's this is me taking a picture of Lee. Krautzer taking a picture of Frank and Mark. And it crosses the pipeline corridor and then closely follows it for, you know, several hundred yards. And this is really good, really good ruts through here. You can see just ahead of Mark there, the swale basically that it follows through there. And it crosses the pipeline corridor again, and then we follow another swale, another depression and swale down to into 2 Mile Creek. And we had to figure out a way to cross 2 Mile Creek. So we're kind of looking around for that, and we did that. And then we hit the Stabler property line, which we couldn't hike on, and then just headed south This is us going through a meadow back to the pipeline corridor and Ross Road. And Dave picked us up again.
Were you just not able to get a hold of all the landowners, or did they deny us permission?
I think, but basically it was, you know, they either didn't respond.
Okay.
Now, I think one of those, what was it? John Hancock did actually respond, but what did they say, Dave? You know,
Yeah,
sometimes in a couple of months.
the Hancock properties are really key to this. There's some of the properties labeled for Boston something or other, but they just plain denied us access. They said, we've got logging operations and we're concerned about fire danger. And they said no. And they haven't been very helpful since that time. I've contacted them several times. So we may not get access to some of the key parts that we want to get access to. And the park ranger, Mark Miller, hasn't been able to help us with that.
Yeah, and that would be north up in here where I was showing earlier those Jack Evans ruts and all the others. That's an area we want to explore when we get up there again, hopefully this May, and take a look at those. This is our Donald Stabler property here. Dave's working on getting us permission to go on here so we can follow the LiDAR route through here and also explore the OSHD route through here. But this was our final day OSHD route, basically coming from Westminster Woods here and coming over here. Looks like we got off track a little bit. Somebody didn't bring their compass. Maybe that was it. And we ended up going up a gully here and kind of coming, following it up to the top of a 4,000-foot knob. This is pretty flat up here, but this is a kind of a high point. And then down the other side, you can see where we tried to zigzag through here, crossing 2 Mile Creek again. And then we went back up to walked back up to the pipeline corridor for this crossing here and explored, you know, both ways here. And we also saw our LiDAR ruts again.
But you never really found anything along the red line, all that.
We did not, and I'll talk about that as we look at the photographs here. Is where we left from the chapel. Church camp has a pioneer grave site there, and we're not sure whether it actually is a pioneer grave site, but it's a fence with a, you know, kind of an oblong pile of rocks in the middle. But this is the kind of signage that they've put up, you know, on the property for their guests. But here we're walking out toward the, and now we've crossed the OSHD route and we're kind of having a little conference about, well, okay, no ruts. So what do we do now? Well, we keep going and following our plan. This is headed up toward the top of that 4,000-foot knob. You see the ocean spray was in bloom. This was really beautiful walking through here because of the ocean spray. And here we're on top of that knob, you know, looking around for ruts. The vegetation does make it a little, you know, a little difficult, but we're looking for a depression or swale, you know, linear depression or swale that's of any length. Here again, we've crossed the line here, and we're kind of talking about, you know, the fact that we're not finding anything.
OCTA,
Oh, I'm gonna make a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich.
they're finding ruts
Oh,
out there near Emigrant Springs where we were.
okay.
Steve, would you go on mute, please?
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
And these are, you know, we should be having ruts around here someplace, but you know, not evident. We came going down that hill. We came into a clearing, and we were looking around for ruts here. We did find this road, but this road is going perpendicular to the route that we're trying to follow. And there was a kind of a semi-developed spring out here too. So I'm thinking that possibly cattle are grazed out here. I didn't see any cow pies, but that's what I thought when I saw that that spring. And we're getting we saw some short linear depressions here going down this hill toward 2 Mile Creek, but nothing of any length. So we're headed down, getting closer to 2 Mile Creek. And here we're at our 2 Mile Creek crossing here. There's a mark in the background using the log we eventually walked over to get across there. And then when we hit the pipeline corridor, we walked back up a ways to look at the area where the OSHD route came across, to look for more ruts there. And this is actually where we had been the day before and walked through. This is part of the LiDAR track, and you can see the, the depression, maybe not a full swale here, but the depression as it goes from the goes off to through the trees. And here we are at the end of the hike, and you can see there's a couple of frowns there. Yeah, it's hot and we're tired, so
I just don't think I was given good warning. I look terrible.
well, you remember Dave tried to take picture of us and he didn't seem to be able to operate my camera, so he got in the picture and I took the photo. So we were kind of milling around here for a while. But yeah, I should have taken more than one, and maybe I could have caught you smiling.
Oh, the other picture made up for it. I hadn't seen that one. That was a good one.
Oh yeah. That was where I asked you to take a couple of steps to the right. And that's why you're laughing, because if you'd have taken a couple of steps to the right, you'd have fallen in the creek. Okay, on to our findings. Westminster Woods trail ruts. Trail ruts at Westminster Woods. Church Camp, or those are the toll road, not the Oregon Trail. And we base this basically on the 1864 GLL survey of sections 3 and 10. And the surveyors documented toll road from Umatilla to Grand Ronde, bearing southeast and northwest. That's a location north of Ross Road, kind of near where that group picture was taken. And that points right to Westminster Woods. And the LiDAR track leads northwest to Westminster Woods. It's documented there by the 1887 surveyors. It's an old stage road. Findings for the Oregon Trail. Oregon Trail goes northwest from Meacham, following Highway 30. That was our conclusion. The 1864 surveyors again documented old Emigrant Wagon Road just north of Meacham at what's now the junction of Highway 30 and Forest Service Road 3030. I'll show a couple of maps here, and this will be a little more clear. If we proceed northwest from this location, we're following Highway 30. And here's my what I call my explainer. This is the old Emigrant Road surveyor note from 1864 saying that the road is headed northwest. Now, this is also the site, the same exact location was documented in 1863 by Timothy Davenport when he established the Willamette baseline through here. And he said it was north 40 degrees west. And this is an 1864 surveyor's note for the toll road going northwest here. This is Meacham, the Meacham Brothers stage station and hotel is about approximately at this blue dot. And here's kind of a wider view here. We've got Meacham down here in our surveyor note locations here showing, the direction that they show from here, the toll road. And this is our LiDAR road going up to our surveyor note locations up here that talk about the old stage road. And here's Westminster Woods. And this is our Emigrant Road surveyor note location. This is Forest Service Road 3030. And this is Highway 30. Okay, our findings on the OSHD route. We didn't find any trail ruts. So basically our findings are there are no findings. We searched over half of the route marked on map sheet 5 as having visible ruts, and we didn't have permission to hike on several properties. And we need to go back and do some more exploration. And hopefully we'll be able to do that this, I'd like to do it this May before the vegetation grows up, too high. Now, before I end, I'm gonna do a hypothesis here. And this is my own. Somebody mute the barking dog, please.
Oh,
This is my own personal hypothesis here. It's not anything we put in the National Park Service report. And again, I'm showing the map here with the red OSHD route and the blue LiDAR track that goes northwest. This is Ross Road down here. Meacham is just off the map down in here. The park is up here. Westminster Woods is here. I don't know, does anybody looking at this map, now Dave, you can't, we've already talked about this, so you can't pipe in, but anybody have any, what do you think when you see something like this? Does anything occur to anyone? Well, what occurred to me was that these were actually the same route. In other words, Earl Bickmore walked the blue line, but drew it on his map at the red line. Now, the blue line, the LiDAR line, was just clear and obvious the whole way down. And we didn't find anything on near the red line. So that's what I came up with.
Can I pipe in now, Robin?
Go ahead.
I agree. I think a couple of points you have to recognize is that they didn't have the benefit of GPS when they were doing these things. So and outside of the best other surveys are the original GLO surveys, but I don't think we've seen any evidence that they ever surveyed their locations, measured their locations. So they may indeed have been finding the swales that they show on some of those earlier maps there, but they were actually on the blue line. They were on the red line. They weren't on the red line. And we do, after going through this, we've determined that everybody seems to have just copied the OSHD 1959 maps for the red line. It's not any evidence that anybody did any original work, and that's Aubrey Haynes and Greg Francois and all of them they just accepted that line. And so I agree with the hypothesis. Perhaps where I vary a little bit from Robin is I still wonder about the fact that even though that's identified as the stage road, that it did overlay at least one of the routes of the Oregon Trail. Also, I'm not saying that's the only one. That's the only thing I still have in my mind. But then it's really important that that Robin has pointed out that the real route may be much closer to Highway 30 than to the real route of the Oregon Trail, much closer to Highway 30 than either of those lines.
Dave, this is Lee. Do you think that they really would have plotted a map or route over the top of that 4,000-foot plateau?
We thought we had the same point, same idea. We looked at it and said, that doesn't make sense. Why did they go up? It's not, as Robin pointed out, it's not a steep climb. It's not, it wouldn't be hard for them to do, but topographically, it doesn't make sense. I agree.
It also went down, this route goes through this gully here, which
Yeah.
doesn't make sense here. You have to, Dave mentioned that he didn't, Earl didn't, or any of the engineers didn't have GPS, of course, and all they had basically was their county maps. The 7.5 minute Meacham quadrangle wasn't published till 64. And there was no 15-minute or 30-minute map of the area that I can find. And I've looked on the USGS historical maps finder and not finding anything. They had the 1 degree by 2 degree, 1 to 250,000 Pendleton map, but it's much too large scale to be useful. Their county maps do show the pipeline. So that was the pipeline corridor. And that was one thing that they could use to orient themselves through here. The only other thing would be the fence lines. They would come upon a fence line and they would know, like maybe they would know that, oh, this fence line's on a section line. I don't know, a lot of times they are, sometimes they're not, of course. They're on maybe quarter section lines or whatever, but those were the only things that, the only features they could orient themselves with. And this is all, like I mentioned before, pretty flat, kind of sloping down this way, but pretty flat and featureless. You can't just look out and see, like if there was a rock pinnacle up here, you could see for a couple of miles and, oh, we're getting near that or some other feature. They're just not there. And, but I have a hard time believing that Earl didn't walk this route. I mean, he said this, he indicated that these were continuous visible ruts. So I believe him. I think he walked through here on continuous visible ruts, but I think he walked the blue.
Great.
But this is kind of a this LiDAR track that we followed down here, the blue, it crosses the pipeline corridor here, follows it really closely, and then oops, that's what I get for using a mouse, and then follows it pretty closely here and then recrosses it again. So if he had actually walked this, he would have known that, oh, I crossed the pipeline corridor, a couple of times. And then up here, oh, I crossed it again. So yeah, I don't know. It's very puzzling. A third thing, or is it fourth thing? Did Earl himself draw the published map? The 10 sheets that were published in 1959. Did he draw those, or did he draw this one? He wasn't. He was a highway engineer. He wasn't a cartographer. So I'm thinking that probably that was done. Those maps were prepared by a state cartographer. And there would have been, he would have had to have been working from something that Earl provided him. The state engineers provided him. But was there a miscommunication of some kind? Or did it matter to them that, they just wanted to make it over here rather than, have it follow the Highway 30 the way I think it did. Here's our surveyor 1864 and 1863 surveyor note location down the bottom right. Northwest is what they said. Well, here's 2 Mile Creek, flows north, bends around here, comes down through here, and then hits Meacham Creek right there in Meacham. So I think from Lee's encampment and Meacham there, they went up this way. Now, some of the diaries that I've looked at, and I did go over this in the presentation I did in May, some of them camped beyond Lee's encampment, half mile or a mile, and they would have probably been up in this little valley up in here.
When we go back this spring, we're going to be looking at that area in a little more detail to see if we can't find some evidence.
Yeah, we've since gotten some more. Stafford Hazlett has given us some maps that he had from. I don't know where he got them from, but it shows the Earl Bickmore's map. It shows a little more detail. He's got a route that comes up through here. But again, it doesn't follow any LiDAR track that I can find on the National Park Service LiDAR map, or any of the the surveyor notes.
What do you see using LiDAR to the right of the highway, the freeway, in that area right up there?
Let me pop over to, let's see, this map here. This is the CalTopo map with all this stuff on it. The LiDAR, let me add some LiDAR tracks here. Zoom in a little bit. This is one from, this is an 1887 surveyor note for Pendleton-LeGrand Wagon Road. And the next one is up here, but there is a LiDAR track that, you know, obviously it doesn't show across the freeway here, but it appears to be continuous up here. And I've been doing some other, you know, marking some other LiDAR tracks through here. This is the one going from that bend, the photo that I showed you going over to the park maintenance area. That's on there. There's one coming up through here. There's, you know, some up in here. If we add, this is going to get a little confusing here, but let's see. If we add the Bickmore map, the dotted red line is what he was on his, what we call them detail maps. He shows them here, instead of coming over here, it shows it going over here. And then there's a fork in the road, and there's one coming up here. But there's no LiDAR in here. There's no surveyor notes, you know, or like here, any of those locations. And come to think of it, like there's no surveyor note locations in here for where it crosses this 4,000-foot knob. Nothing here. The only thing close for crossing up here at the top of section 32 is this note here, Wagon Road North. You know, this is a prominent road here that goes down to Ross Road. It's probably a good or fairly good road. But that's the closest it comes there. You know, just adding his detail maps just makes things more confusing. And you know, to your question, no, it doesn't. You know, there isn't any LiDAR, you know, any LiDAR tracks through here. Now remember that this is, you know, this land has all been, you know, it's privately owned. They've done some logging in different places. Here on the topographic map, you see this big white square. That's the Hancock property. I think what they did is they went in and cut down all the trees and they replanted it. And that's kind of going to be a, you know, like a little tree farm for them. No, I didn't. Go ahead.
Were there any early military notes on this region, on this area?
No. And there was no, as far as I know, there was no military road through, you know, over the Blue Mountains. You know, there was the Dalles military road that went south through, I think that was Crooked River country, and then went over to Vale. But that's would be quite a bit south of our area.
Mm-hmm.
And that area up there is all quite flat, you know, I mean, relatively speaking. I mean,
Yeah.
they have a lot of alternates up there, a lot of choices, depending on where the trees were and whether they go left or right around a tree. I could see them spreading out.
Well, you know, I think this is my opinion. I think that the pioneers in their wagons were coming over, you know, through all of the timber through here and up over, were simply following a track. They're following a road, following each other. They, some of the early diaries, especially coming up from Hillgard through there, that was, you know, they talk about the timber being so dense that they couldn't see somebody 50 feet away. So there was maybe a lot more timber back then.
Mm-hmm.
like I say, this has been logged. I mean, it's not clear cut logged like you see, west of the Cascades. This is a mixed forest, but they'll go in and take out certain trees. I would tend to think that this is a lot more open now than it was back then.
Probably right about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was all virgin back then, so.
Yeah. And
And they would have followed the leader there through a well-established path.
right. I mean, these are people that, they'd never been here before. In fact, for a lot of them, this was the first time that they'd seen, been traveled up mountains and through these big conifers. If you're from the Midwest, you don't see any of that. So, they would have a tendency to just follow one another or their wagon master, say, through this area.